Oh, man. Coming up next, two of the three principals of one of rock's greatest trios on a few of their biggest hits of the 80s. And actually, some all-time myths are busted in this episode, including the oft-reported story that the great drummer from the band hated one of the band's biggest hits. It's actually a total lie. He didn't hate it. In fact, he says the song had a perfect demo, one that the band tried to recreate hundreds of times, but in the end, they just overdubbed the drum part over the original 7-year-old rough demo. It came out perfect. Then there's the hit song that has the most complex bass line of its time that would be impossible for a mere mortal to sing and play at the same time, but luckily this band's singer was more than up to the task. And then there's this song that is the most eloquent, simple song of the time, where one of rock's greatest lyricists drafted a nonsensical song with silly made-up words, and then the song that had a word that you couldn't rhyme with anything. You'll have to hear what they finally did to make it work out. Coming up next, great interview on Professor of Rock. Hey, music junkies, Professor of Rock, always here to celebrate the greatest artists and the greatest songs of all times. That's a lot of greats, but it is a great episode coming up. You know, if you remember this classic commercial,
every chewy one is real fruity fun.
You're going to dig this channel of deep musical nostalgia. Make sure to subscribe below by clicking the red button, the white button, and click the notification so you know when our stuff comes out. Also, check out our podcast on Apple or Spotify or wherever else you get your podcasts. Make sure to rate us and leave a comment for us if you would. So it's time for another episode from our series, Revelations, where featured artists go deep on their greatest songs and greatest albums. And you get insights into the hits that you won't find anywhere else. And today we have a special one. We've got two legends, two of the three members of the Police. We've got lead singer and bassist Sting and drummer Stuart Copeland on several of the Police's best songs of the 80s, including the most eloquent, simple song that silly lyrics made it a classic. And then there's the complex bass line that would be impossible for any other singer to play and belt out at the same time. But you know, it's Sting we're talking about here. Plus, the drummer that Stuart Copeland always finishes second to when fans approach him. Great stories coming up in these interviews. Let's get into it. Well, you guys always had these off-the-wall album titles, right? Let's talk about Zenyatta Mandata from 1980. We always wondered if we were saying it correctly.
You're saying that one correctly, but the first two are always mispronounced. Outlando's D'Amour, period. D'Amour, and I usually hear it as D'Amour, which there's D apostrophe, which means it's D'Amour. Regatta de Blanc, it could be Regatta de Blanc in English, but since it's got that C at the end, that makes it kind of a little bit Frenchish.
Yeah, I always said Regatta de Blanc. That's always how I heard it said. But
we can go with that. That's fine. The next one, Zenyatta Mandata, no problem with that. That's easy. But okay, the source of those three album titles was my brother Miles, who by this time was our manager, and he did have a knack for coming up with great album names.
The do-do-do-da-da-da, top 10 in America.
That was just to piss off people on the mic. And I don't know why he wanted to piss off people on the mic, because the person saying those undignified was him. Every night on stage, he had to go do, you know. Mommy, he said doo-doo.
An articulate song about being inarticulate.
Yes.
I love how he described that, taking his cue from past songs like "To Do Ron Ron" and "Do Wah Diddy," and you know the language of rock and roll, right?
Yeah.
Next to me, you're singing.
And it's a very deep and poignant lyric, in spite of its daft title.
Or Tutti Frutti, right?
Yeah. Well, I don't know how deep Tutti Frutti was.
Tutti Frutti, oh Rudy, Tutti Frutti, oh Rudy.
The vocals don't come in until like 27 seconds into the song, which you could never do today. But it's such a great intro between you and Andy.
We complained, though, that guitar, the effect that he had on his guitar, to me, made it sound out of tune. So I wince at the beginning of that song and he swears blind that it's perfectly in tune. It was just a flanger or whatever he had going on. But the song was great.
The arrangement and recording, what do you remember about that? Were you guys at all worried about some of the lyric? It's interesting how people, their logic ties me up and rapes me.
Yeah, that's a great lyric.
I agree.
And that's why I call it deeper than Tutti Frutti or Do-Wah Diddy. I don't think Do-Wah Diddy had any such eloquence in the other parts of the lyric. Yeah, that's a great lyric. And, kind of ballsy of old Stingo to say doo-doo on the mic publicly. But then if it's okay for Little Richard, then it's okay for him.
Well, Driven to Tears, I love the way you segue the triplets and syncopated rhythm on that song. Tell me about that one.
Well, it's all instinctive. We didn't rehearse the songs. We just recorded them. Sting would whip out a, hey, and he would only reveal his songs on an as-needed basis. And the times when we needed a song is when we finished recording his last song. And Andy and I would write songs just so that Sting wouldn't feel like he was the only guy doing any work. But we all preferred working on his songs. All of those drum backing tracks were pretty much arrived at spontaneously on the spot. Within 20 minutes of hearing the song for the first time, we're recording it, and whatever I played right then and there spontaneously is on the record forever. Now, all the guitars, the bass, the singing, they had a month or two to redo all that, but the drums, upon which everything else is built, are there for life. And so ask me what was going through what was the concept? There was no concept. It was just entirely instinctive.
Well, let's jump into Ghost in the Machine from 81. That's my personal favorite album by you guys. A time when computers were starting to take over, digital, even the album cover, showcases this. I tell people that all the time, and they're like, what? I'm like, that's the Police. That's the three of them. It's digitally the Police. And everybody just thinks it's like an alarm clock or something, and they don't understand. But that is actually you guys.
Well, I thought it was a brilliant concept. I thought it was really graphic. Made a great T-shirt. Our manager, Miles, reckons that it cost us millions of sales because it didn't have a sexy picture of the band on front. I don't know whether that's true or not. It did pretty well. Did better than the previous album, Zenyatta, which did have in my opinion, kind of unsexy picture of the three blonde heads.
Well, the album kind of explores magic and other worlds and the spiritual side of man's psyche. A record, I think, well before its time. In addition, you were starting a 2-year trek that would make you the biggest band on the planet. What was the feeling and the theme of this record to you?
Banging. I wasn't paying that much attention to the lyrics. When I did the backing tracks, Sting was just faking the lyrics just to get us through the song for navigation, but he wasn't really doing a performance. Actually, he was, because he just is that way. If he's playing something, he plays it with full commitment. But I wasn't really listening to the lyrics. I never did listen to the lyrics that much until I found myself orchestrating these songs and having to work with the lyrics. And then I discovered, dang, all these years later, damn, the guy's kind of a genius. Don't tell him I said that.
Well, I think he knows by now that he's a genius with so many phenomenal songs.
Strangely not. The weirdest thing I will share with you, I'm speaking out of class here, but the man is not full of arrogance with regard to his music. He's very sensitive and vulnerable. And I'm thinking, wow, how's that possible? You got how many Grammys? 500 Grammys? What's it take for you to feel a little bit of confidence in your music? But that's just not his nature. It makes him try harder, I guess. Dig deeper.
I think he's one of the greatest lyricists ever.
Yeah.
And
I endorse that, but my opinion doesn't count because I don't listen to lyrics.
Well, I got to ask you about Darkness. I'll ask you about the hits too, but Darkness is actually one of my favorite Police songs.
Oh, shucks.
I love it. I'm not just saying that. I've always loved this. I put it in just about every playlist because it's so haunting.
Well, that feeling, that's one of the few times I think that I'm not a pop songwriter. I've managed to eke out some success in every known form of music except for pop songs. But that's one of the pop songs that I wrote. It's not even really a pop song, more of an album track. I can dream of schemes when I'm sitting in my seat. But it kind of works. The music is extremely simple. But the lyric, I thought, nailed a problem, which is that, when you get an inspiration, that means you've got to get up and out of the comfy seat and start doing stuff. Life was easy when it was boring. And man, as soon as you embark on an adventure or an endeavor of any kind, you kind of wish you were still sitting back in that comfy seat. I can dream up schemes when I'm sitting in my seat. I don't see any flaws till I get to my feet. I don't see any flaws till I get to my feet. As I fumble in the darkness for a key to a door that's wide open.
Well, tell me about that, the music and, kind of some of the sound effects in the song.
Some sounds with echoes, just crunching noises that we use kind of more as rhythmic. That's Andy. Yeah, that guy could do anything on that guitar. And that was the big thing about Andy, is he wasn't a finger twirler. He didn't shred, although he totally can shred. On a live show, watch that guy shred. But when we were making albums, he was extremely disciplined, and he conceived of parts that were not, like he's like the Ringo Starr of guitar. They weren't flash, but they were super effective. And in fact, he's not sort of held up as a guitar hero because he wasn't posing and everything like that. But just quietly, all those guitar heroes are checking out what Andy did, because he brought kind of a soundscape, which wasn't necessarily a guitar riff. It was like in Walking on the Moon and Darkness. It's just a vibe, a cloud of atmosphere, of emotion. Not necessarily, you can't hear some plectrum plucking on a guitar string necessarily.
Yeah, I think all these years later, there are two trios that people that were appreciated in his time, but I think that they're definitely looking inside of your music and what each member brought to it in the Police and in Rush.
Well, Rush, Neil was a good friend of mine. And in spite of the fact that one of the indignities of being me, one that I have to deal with is, walking down, whistling a happy tune, and somebody comes up, oh, wow, Stuart Copeland, my God, you're my second favorite drummer. And I know it's Neil. It's always Neil.
I love that. In the early history of popular music, master lyricists enlightened our planet. Titans like Cole Porter, Billy Strayhorn, Ira Gershwin, Johnny Mercer, Jerome Kern, Irving Berlin, and so on. But over the last several decades, Sting has continued in that tradition, writing countless standards that have defined the joy and the sorrow of our life and times. Seems in every period of my life, whether in happiness or sadness, in depression or euphoria, Sting's music has been a constant, a light in the darkness that has made the journey of life complete. And I'm honored to discuss some of his greatest works and lyrics on Professor of Rock today. Honored to have Sting with me here. Thank you, sir.
Well, that is extravagant praise, Adam. I'm going to have to try and live up to that. But, when you mention standard writers like Johnny Mercer, that's really what I aspire to. I don't know whether I've really achieved that, but that golden age of American songwriting is something that has inspired me and continues to inspire me. And really the idea of writing a standard That's the benchmark for me. And standards are timeless. I mean, they hark back to a golden age, admittedly, but they still resonate today. And so, yeah, you've tapped into something that is my ambition, but it's moot whether I've actually achieved that.
Well, I believe you have. I want to point out, of the most played songs in radio history, you're the only one to have 2 songs in the top 10. Not even the Beatles have 2 songs in the top 10. Every Little Thing She Does Is Magic is the 8th most played. So I just wanted to throw that out there. But
wow.
Well, Every Little Thing She Does Is Magic. Again, there have been so many stories out there. You don't know what's true and what's not. I've read stories that you hated that song.
Not at all. The recording process was difficult because Sting brought in a demo. As usual, we could have just released his demo just like that, and it would have been a hit. It's that kind of song. But we had to policify it, so we tried to policify it every which way. And we did it slow, we did it fast, we did it punk, we did it jazz, we did it every which way. And everything didn't improve on it. It kind of diminished it. And so finally, in frustration, I said, okay, just run down your demo and you wave me through the changes, and I'll show you how crap that's going to be. First thing in the morning, one grumpy morning, over-caffeinated. Okay, just play your dumb song and I'll just bet, And that one take is the record. So it's basically Sting's demo with me overdubbing the drums in this case, which is very rare. Usually you start with the drums. But this case, I just played it down with his demo. And then Andy did the guitar parts. And that's the record.
Another classic opening, setting the mood, the brilliance of the dynamics between the verse and the chorus. One of the best bridges in history, as far as I'm concerned, in the 80s. I resolved to call her up 1,000 times a day. Not only are you a master of the bridge to change it up, but it always has such a great payoff in the song. These mini stories, and in the end, that's what makes it so memorable.
I'm interested in narrative, Adam. I want to really tell stories. Stories have a beginning, a middle, and a resolution, or a turnaround. And that's the great thing about standards. They all had a bridge, like an 8-bar bridge, that changed the perspective of the story.
And by the way, he wrote that song way years earlier on a bus on the way to France, in a bus full of punk rock bands, including the Damned, the Clash, and all these bands were all crammed into a bus for 2 days, getting from London down to the south of France to play this festival down there, this punk festival. And, Paul Simonon and Sting were head to head, and, without, sneaking around behind Joe Strummer's back, Paul actually gave a shit about his instrument and wanted to be a better bass player. And so these sort of like talking to Sting about technique and everything, and just surreptitiously. But during, as a personal rebellion against all of that bedlam on the bus, Sting was quietly writing this totally unpunk song. Every little thing she does is magic. His problem was that he couldn't find the only rhyme. He could only find 2 rhymes with magic, one of which was tragic. That doesn't fit. I mean, and the other was pelagic, which means ocean going. That hard to fit that into a song. So we went with tragic. Everything she does imagine. Life would be It's a great song, but its lightness was kind of a rebellion against the punk stuff, and we didn't record it as a song until many years later, a couple albums later.
And it's got that great line that he repeats, and he's repeated it in some of his other. He did it in 7 Days as well. His solo song, I have to tell the story of 1,000 rainy days since we first met. It's a big enough umbrella, but it's always me that ends up getting wet.
Oh, I love that line. I took that line because I play that as an encore for my show. And that line, I've milked it for all, and the three ladies singing that line is so beautiful.
Pure poetry for sure. If I had to pick a lyric from your entire career, I think that might be my favorite. Do I have to tell the story of 1,000 rainy days since we first met? It's a big enough umbrella, but it's always me that ends up getting wet.
All true stories.
Where did that come from? Because I know that song was before even the Police.
It was. I wrote that in a little basement in Bayswater, and 3 doors down there was this very pretty blonde girl with green eyes, and I sort of took a fancy to her, and I didn't have the nerve to talk to her for about 2 years. I'm now married to that woman.
So that line was really about her.
Oh yeah, boy does she know it.
I gotta just ask you briefly about spirits in the material world.
Yeah, not my favorite song, probably because that drum rhythm is the hardest to play. In all of its simplicity, I hit the drums very few times. It's not a lot of ramalama, but it's on the knife's edge of disaster because there's no downbeat. It's all upbeat. And with no downbeat, who am I? Where am I? Where is up? Where is down? What's going on here? And so with the orchestras, the keyboard player, usually I have to have him not play because he just doesn't get that up chop. The guitarist can handle it. Check, 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 check. But the keyboards, they just go cross-eyed and they end up on the downbeat and, they can't handle it. And all three of us, and try singing that song while playing that bass line. The components are very simple, very few overdubs, but it's a very dangerous rhythm.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. Leave us a comment about the Police. What are your memories of these songs? What do you think about some of these stories? I'm blown away by what I find out. And there's so many urban legends out there, stories that just aren't true. I even read some reports that said that Stuart Copeland hated every little thing she does is magic, and it's just not true. So let's have a great discussion, celebrate the music of the Police. If you like our content, we invite you to subscribe. We'd love to have you as part of our community. Until next time, 3 chords and the truth, my friends.